So question number one. I'm going to skip the introduction and go directly to the question. There we go. For Thursday's class, I would love to hear more about Lashon Hara. When is it okay to talk about other people? My favorite part of the Amidah is my God, keep my tongue from evil, my lips from evil. And above is covered in this week's Parsha Metzora. Okay, so the question is, would love to hear more about Lashon Hara, which literally means the evil tongue, which relates to any type of negative speech, gossiping, and the like. And when is it okay to talk about other people? Good question. So, Lashon Hara in general speaks about speaking negatively about others. If I talk positively about others, of course, in a positive context, if I talk positive, but those positive words are taken in a very cynical way or sarcastic way, then I'm essentially not speaking positively about the other. Then it's speaking negatively. So, of course, I'm talking about speaking positively in a positive context with positive results. That's how I talk about the other. Great. Speak about the other. No problem. But if my words can be interpreted even in the most bizarre way as negative words, then I should refrain from saying them. But I want to go a little bit deeper into the laws of Lashon Hara, which is also part of the question. And that is, I think the laws of Lashon Hara speak essentially about the power of the tongue. It comes from the verse in Tehillim that says, Netzor leshoncha mera usfatecha midaber mirma. This verse authored by King David in the book of Psalms. I think it's Psalm 36 or 37. It's in the 30s. But guard your tongue from speaking evil, and your lips from speaking slyly. And it's all part of the context of whoever desires life, mi ha'ish chafetz chaim, should guard his tongue, guard his mouth. Why so? Because we very often underestimate the power of our tongue, the power of our mouth. A mouth in Judaism is seen as perhaps one of the greatest weapons we have. In fact, it even says that one who speaks Lashon Hara is equal to someone who murders. Why? Because someone who actually murders, a murderer murders the body. Lashon Hara murders the soul. So it's the same act. It's the act of murder. But that's how strong this weapon is. Now, if it's used in the correct way, like any other strong weapon, then it can bring so much construction, so much life. And therefore, it's the answer of King David, whoever desires life, guard your tongue, because you have such a powerful weapon here. If you use it in the right way, it will only increase your life and increase life in the world. That's how powerful your weapon is. If, God forbid, it's used in the wrong way, then it can bring death upon you and upon others. It can truly murder people's souls, again, like the Talmud says. And that's why we really have to be super careful to the greatest measure about what we say. I will say this, I think this lesson pertains specifically to our generation, because we think that every story is worth reacting on. We think that every little tweet is worth retweeting. We think that every Facebook post is worth commenting on. But I'm sorry, it's not. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern of 250 years ago, the Kotzker Rebbe, who would say, not everything that is thought should be said, not everything that is said should be written, not everything that is written should be published, and not everything that is published should be read. Why? Because again, the power of words is so strong that if you say something that you thought, yet that has no room in our world, it will create havoc, create destruction. We've seen it too many times. I remember sitting next to a woman on an airplane. Remember those days when we used to fly? Well, I was sitting next to a woman one day. By the way, that's one of my worst nightmares, someone coming and just, I like my time on my plane, reading my books, doing my thing. But bad for her. So she was telling me how she hasn't spoken to her brother for 20 years. Now I said to her, what led to all of this? And the root of it all was a stupid comment that her brother made to her and became public. That's why she hasn't spoken to her brother for 20 years. And I'm saying to myself, whoa, How sad is this? How terrible this distortion of words has become, to the point that they haven't spoken for 20 years. But I'm also saying to myself, wow, look how truthful our sages were, King David was, when he said that we should guard our tongue. Indeed, the tongue can create such havoc in relationships, such havoc in the world. Therefore, we have to be very careful. I will say this, that's the power of the Hebrew language. And we've mentioned this in the past too. But you know, the word for words in Hebrew is diburim or dibur. And it's the exact same word as the word for bees, the insect, bees. Why? Because words are like bees. They can sting or they can produce honey. And the power really is in our mouth. We have the power with this very strong weapon to either produce honey or to sting. Now, we also have to remember that the default setting of the bee is what? To sting? No. If it stings, it dies. The default setting of the bee is to produce honey. And that should be the default setting of each and every human being also when using this weapon, to produce honey. And if we sting, if we go to that which is not a default setting and we sting, just like the bee, we can die. We can die spiritually. I'll just conclude with that, and it will maybe, again, emphasize the power of this weapon here. But there's a great story in the Midrash, I believe, about this man who was gossiping, and he felt terrible about his gossiping. So he went to his rabbi. He said, Rabbi, I'm terribly sorry. I've been gossiping terribly lately. Can you please give me a remedy? And the rabbi said, yes, sure. Do you have a feather pillow at home? The man said, yes, I have a feather pillow. Go to your home, take any feather pillow that you have, slice it open, and let the feathers spread themselves in the wind. The man says, is that it? Really? That's the remedy? I'll do it for sure. He went home, sliced his feather pillow. The feathers went everywhere. And then he went back to the rabbi. He said, that's it. Is my remedy over? The rabbi said, no, there's one more thing you need to do. Now go and collect all those feathers that were spread by the wind. He said, but it's impossible. They're everywhere. He said, well, it's just like your words. When you gossip, those words go everywhere. Or in the words of Winston Churchill, lies have the time to travel the world while truth is busy just putting his pants on. I think something like that. The lies, words travel so quickly. They like those feathers. And if we're not careful, it will be very, very, very hard, almost impossible to then gather them and ensure that they don't create that havoc and that destruction that they could potentially do. So that's the essence of Lashon Hara, and I hope I answered that question. And that's right. And Joyce is saying, yeah, words have the power when someone is under general anesthetic as well. I agree. I will add one more thing, and I don't speak about this too much. But words have a spiritual power. You know, I don't know about you. I feel it when I walk into people's homes. Back in the day, not anymore until this is over, but when I used to walk in people's homes, I could feel the tension. I'm sure you could feel the tension, the energy in the room. And sometimes it's very positive energy, and you know that this home is filled with goodness and kindness. Otherwise, you know that this home is filled with strife. What creates that? The words. The words that are recited in the home create tension, create this negative energy. If they are negative words, if they're positive words, they create this positive energy, and it's felt. So no doubt, you're right, Joyce. Thank you for adding that. Okay, next question. Dear Rabbi, during your Thursday Q&A session, can you please make some suggestion that we individually and as a community can do to stop this virus? Can we make some suggestions that we individually and as a community can do to stop this virus? So first, there are things that I am sure the health experts and governments are working on to stop this virus, but that's not in our domain. What we can do, the role that we can play, I think is multidimensional. Role number one is, of course, listen to all of the health experts, and if they tell us to stay inside, we have to stay home. If they tell us do A, B, and C in order to ensure that this virus doesn't spread, we have to listen to the health experts. There's no question about it. It's probably the most important, without exaggeration, the most important commandment in the Torah of Nishmartem me'od lenafshotechem. You have to guard your lives very much, me'od, it says in Deuteronomy, to the point that we desecrate the Shabbat, we desecrate Yom Kippur in order to save someone's life. That is, we spoke about this in the past, but that is of the highest importance. And that's the first and foremost thing we need to do in order to ensure, what were the words here, in order to stop this virus. Number two, I think there are things that we need to do in order to grow from this virus. Every challenge is a birth of an opportunity. I wholeheartedly believe that. And I think that even in this challenge, there's a tremendous opportunity to grow together from it and become better human beings and a better community and a better society altogether. What can be done in that regard? That will stop the spiritual virus of this world. What can be done? First, I think that the fact that this rat race of life has stopped and everyone now is forced to focus on that which is truly important, on our families, on the inside, on our values, that in of itself speaks volumes to the message of God in this virus. And that is one thing that we can all do. Strengthen our relationships, use this time to bond in a deeper way with our family members, and at the same time to also spread goodness and kindness among each and all, especially the vulnerable. That's number two. Number three, what can be done to stop this virus? I never underestimate the power of prayer. One of the questions I was looking at before, but speaks about the power of prayer, and we'll elaborate. But I really believe that the prayer can change things. God can do anything. God can stop this virus right now if we want. He's the creator of this world, so he can stop it right now. And if we can each pray and shake the heavens, maybe add more Psalms. I know there's a terrific WhatsApp group here at CBT where we try to finish the Psalms multiple times, and I have to thank Isa, Joyce, Anna, Khana, everyone here involved in this WhatsApp group. It's really heartwarming, and I have no doubt that it creates wonders in the heavens. And please God, God will end this pandemic right now. But I will say this, that speaking about the power of prayer and how we ought to use this power, but there's a lovely story, one of my favorite stories of the Talmud in the Tractate of Tanit, that speaks of how there was great famine in the land of Israel, and there was really no drop of rain for the entire winter. And the rabbis decreed a fast day, and it didn't help, and more prayers, and it didn't help. And eventually they went out to the streets and had a public prayer, and they asked Rabbi Akiva to lead the prayer. Rabbi Akiva was the cantor, and then he went out of the norm of the text, the regular text of the prayers, and he started to erupt in a cry and shout to God, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. And he spoke of God being the Father, and how dare a father not have some mercy on his children. As soon as he said Avinu Malkeinu and spoke in those terms with God from the heart, clouds started to cover the skies, and soon enough it rained. Sometimes all it takes is a prayer from the heart where we say to God, look, you're our parent, it's enough. And that helps. That breaks all decrees. And that's why, by the way, these words, Avinu Malkeinu, were then later on incorporated in the high holiday prayers, because we hope that they evoke the same power in the heavens, and they arouse God and his compassion as much as he arose then when Rabbi Akiva uttered those words. But that's one little story that comes to show you the power of prayer. So that's another dimension yet of what can be done to stop this virus. Okay, next question. This is going from prayer to prayer. This is a very hard question to even utter. But this is how it goes. Dear Rabbi, I have been praying a lot during this pandemic. I have a close friend who was sick, and last week she passed away. I'm devastated. She was such a beautiful person inside out, etc. Okay, here's my question, although I'm embarrassed to ask it. Why does it seem that God sometimes does not listen to our prayers? I prayed so hard for a recovery, but it didn't help. I also pray sometimes for other things, but God doesn't always answer me. Please advise. First, my heart goes out to this woman, and it's devastating. And there are moments in life where you're speechless. We just learned about this in last week's portion, where Aaron's two sons died all of a sudden in the temple in the middle of the great celebration of the inauguration of the tabernacle. And they died in front of him, his two children. What was Aaron's reaction? Vaidom Aaron. He was speechless. He became silent. He had no words. And in a way, my heart also breaks in tears for this woman. And no words here can help. Only silence, maybe Vaidom Aaron. But if I had to dive deeper into this question of, it seems that God really doesn't listen to our prayers sometimes. It's true. God doesn't listen to our prayers sometimes. And only Racheli Frankel could say this, but Racheli Frankel, who was here many times, who lost her own son after he was kidnapped and murdered in the summer of 2014 in Israel, she says, God didn't listen to my prayers. I asked for my son to be found alive, and he was found dead after 3 weeks. So God didn't listen to my prayers. But then she said, I don't have, and no one I think has a contract with God saying you have to do A, B, C, D, and E for me. And we don't have a contract for God where we say to him, you know what, God, you have to listen to our prayers. That's a very tough answer. But again, only Racheli Frankel, who lost her own son, could say such a thing. But I want to go deeper into this and say that maybe God doesn't listen to our prayers the way we want them to happen. But he listens to our prayers in ways that we can't even fathom, that they work their magic, so to speak. Prayers are sometimes answered in ways that are revealed to us only much later on, not maybe in cases of life and death. But I can tell you this, Kenny Melek, who's a member of our congregation, I don't know if he's on the call, I don't see him here, but he had one of the most shining souls of a father that one could have. His father, he would bring his father, even at a very late stage in life. He lived until the age of 101. Some of you may remember him. He would bring his father and take care of him so delicately and so in such a dignified way, each and every Shabbat for services. And I remember speaking to his father once and him telling me his life story. And listen to this. And he was born in Białystok, Poland. And the Russians came, stormed into the town, and they took all the Jews and sent them to Siberia. And he was crying to God all the time, it's not fair. Why do I deserve this? This torture of living in Siberia and the torture of the conditions I'm in. He stayed in Siberia until after the war, until after the Holocaust, until 1946. After the war, he had learned that the Nazis, shortly after the Russians came to his town, came back to that town of Białystok and took all of the remaining Jews and sent them to concentration camps and killed all of them. And he said to himself, you see, I was complaining to God and I was praying to God to get me out of here. But I hadn't realized that if God had listened to me and God had gotten me out of here, then I would have been dead. Then I would have gone back to my town. The Nazis would have found me and they would have sent me to a concentration camp. So being in Siberia is really what saved my life. So I ask you, was God listening to his prayers or not? He wasn't listening to the specific prayer he had wanted, but I believe that God was listening to him. He was saying, oh, you're my son, you're speaking to me, I'll take care of you. Now, could he have known in 1940, when the Russians took him to Siberia, could he have known that this was going to happen and that his prayers would have been answered in a very different way? No. But retrospectively, he saw how his prayers were answered again in a very different way, but were answered in the most effective way that they could have been answered. He was saved. His life was saved because of being sent to Siberia again. So I'm using the story again because sometimes our prayers are answered not in the way we want them, and it takes years or maybe months or maybe weeks, and if we're lucky, maybe days to see that they were answered in a different way. But the mere fact that we are praying, that we are saying to God, already makes a huge effect in the heavens, as we spoke about before. and God says, oh, here's a child speaking to me. Imagine your own child coming to you and speaking to you. Doesn't that melt your heart? Sometimes you have to say no, but it still builds that relationship. It develops that bond. And that's the power of the prayer, of each and every prayer that we believe in. So yes, we might not have our exact prayers answered, but certainly the power of each and every prayer develops a bond with God that in return showers us with God's blessings, that I believe much later on then revealed to us. That's number two. So number one, we have no contract with God. Number two, there is still power to each and every prayer. And we might not see it immediately, but very often, and hopefully by all of us, it's revealed at one point or another. Number three, and this is the last point I'll share. I'm reminded of the story of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's a powerful story about how a soldier, I think it was in the war of 1967, was facing an ambush with his unit, and they thought, that's it. Everyone there is going to die. And there was a soldier then who told all his peers, well, now is the time to pray. We have nothing else to do. We can't fight back. There's a tremendous ambush. We have to hide and wait for some rescue. But we have to pray. There was a soldier who was an atheist, who called himself an atheist, but as we all know, there's no atheist in foxholes. And he was so moved by the appeal of this fellow soldier that he said, you know what, I'm going to pray. He prayed at that moment of tremendous danger. And not only did he pray, but he added a vow. And he said to God, God, if you save me from this, I promise you, I will start wearing tefillin on my left arm, which was the arm that he needed to put tefillin on, each and every day of my life. The ambush continued. They shot these soldiers unstoppably. This man was injured where? On his left arm. Thank God he was saved. But the doctors had to amputate his left arm. And for days and months, he carried this tremendous pain in his heart, saying, what, was God playing a sour joke on me? I promised to wear tefillin on my left arm I don't even have a left arm. And he went with this question to many rabbis and many people across the world, and no one was able to satisfy him. Eventually he got to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. He told the story to Rabbi Schneerson. Rabbi Schneerson cried with him. This is him telling the story. And then Rabbi Schneerson came to him and he said, look, I know you have no left arm. No, God was not playing a sour joke on you. Maybe what God was telling you is that he loves you unconditionally, with or without your tefillin. He loves you unconditionally. He said this was the first time he could finally take this weight on his shoulders and lift it. He felt as if the world now was open to him with new opportunities, and that his heart could be filled once again with joy. I'm saying the same thing. Sometimes, yes, our prayers are not answered. And sometimes we experience such unfathomable challenges like deaths, like this woman is writing here in this email. But we also have to remember that God loves us unconditionally, and he doesn't desert us. He doesn't abandon us. And yes, our prayers may not be answered the way we want them. We believe that our prayers will be answered in some mysterious way that will be revealed to us in the future, like answer number 2. But we also have to remember that just like a parent, as I was saying, God loves us unconditionally. All he wants from us is to come and say hello from time to time. We might not always be able to answer our prayers, but it doesn't mean that he abandoned us. It doesn't mean that he's playing any sour jokes on us. All he means is that he loves us and he sees the big picture that sometimes we cannot see. And last but not least, I want to add this because it's such a loaded question and such an important question. Speaking about death, I will quote the Midrash and leave it as is. But the Midrash says that, we human beings react very weirdly when it comes to life and death. Because when someone is born, we're filled with happiness. We rejoice. When someone dies, we cry. The Midrash says it should really be the opposite way. That when someone is born, we should cry. And when someone dies, we should be happy. Why so? And the Midrash gives the analogy of a ship that leaves the shore on a mission. on a business mission, or whatever else. When the ship leaves the shore, the people that are responsible for the ship staying on shore, how should they react? With maybe fear. What will happen to the ship? With anxiety. When the ship comes back and says, I fulfilled my mission, then people should be happy. The people welcoming them on the shore should say, oh, wow, you fulfilled the mission, we're so happy. Great. The same thing with souls. When souls come down to this world, we should be anxious. Is the soul going to complete its mission or not? We don't know. When the soul leaves the world, that's when we should be happy and say, oh, this soul did so much good, as I'm sure this friend of this woman did so much good. We could say, ah, she fulfilled a mission. We should be happy for the soul's complete mission. So that's yet another dimension to this answer, and I'll leave it as is. And I'm happy to continue. And again, I'm telling this woman who wrote this question that if I can help in any way, please let me know. I'm happy to continue this conversation and really be there with you and for you. All right, next question. Dear Rabbi, what is your opinion about sharing what seems to be inappropriate and maybe even insensitive, but I have to say funny coronavirus messages on social media? So I'm the recipient of such messages. Yes, I get WhatsApps from time to time with corny jokes and sometimes, how do you call it, inappropriate and insensitive messages. I'm sure we all get those on a daily basis. What's my opinion? I'm going to go back to what I said before, that not everything that he said should be published. Not everything that is published should be distributed in this case. Yes, it carries a lot of weight. Now, most people, thank God, know also how to take those messages in a light way. I sometimes receive jokes, and yes, they might be very inappropriate or very insensitive, but I understand the context in which they were written and the purpose for which they were written to lighten up the situation and to bring a little fun. If that's the case, fine. I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. It's all right. You got a message like this, don't become Mother Teresa. It's all good. You can take it in the way that it was sent. We don't have to be, each other's keeper. That's that. I will say that if you're the recipient of those messages. If you are the sender of those messages, think a million times to whom you're sending them, because some people won't know how to take them, and think a million times whether they are really worth sending. In a broader way, Socrates very powerfully said that an unexamined life is not worth living. And I would say an unexamined message is not worth sending. So think, examine that message, examine the recipient, examine the reason, examine the way it's going to be taken, examine the way it might then be from the person you're sending it to, disseminated. It might be disseminated to places that you don't want that message to go. So examine that message before you send it. If you're the recipient, it's all right. That's the society we live in. It's okay. You can, thank God we have the option to delete those messages too. So if you don't like them, delete them. All right. Next question. Dear Rabbi, I've heard you speak about the power of positive thinking. But how can we think good in face of such disease, death, and uncertainty? Share your advice. So, yeah, I do speak about the power of positive thinking often, because not only do I believe in it, I'm nothing, but Judaism believes in it. Judaism speaks about it in countless times. Just one of the times it speaks about it that comes to mind is with Moses. If you remember, Moses had killed an Egyptian to save a fellow Jew. You remember that biblical story? He was out in the streets. He was the prince of Egypt, and he saw a Jew being beaten to death. So he saved him by killing the Egyptian that was killing him. And then he heard that the word went out, and he said, Achen noda davar. The word went out, gosh, Pharaoh now wants to kill me because I killed an Egyptian soldier. And then it says, Vayira Moshe me'od. And Moshe became very afraid. And he said to himself, I got to get out of here. I got to escape. The commentaries that are very sensitive to every word and every nuance in the Torah point out, that it was the fear of Moses that made him, that put him in danger. If Moses was not afraid, Pharaoh would have not been upset at Moses, and Moses wouldn't have had to then escape Egypt. That's how far these commentaries go. Why? Because they believe that if Moses had been thinking positively, it would have created a positive energy in Egypt, even in Pharaoh's mind, and then Pharaoh would have thought positively about this whole ordeal. But because Moses was afraid himself, it again spread this fear and this anxiety in Egypt. It reached Pharaoh's head. Pharaoh became anxious about this ordeal, and he wanted therefore to take his revenge on Moses. That's how far these commentaries go with this specific story. It's just a biblical story that comes to mind again that shows how Judaism believes in the power of thinking. But I don't have to go to Judaism for that. I'm sure you all know the story that happened in 1940. You remember the story about Walt and Gracie, what were the names? Grants or something like that. But this is a story about a couple who had just got married and they wanted to go to some honeymoon in California, in the woods of California. And they rented a cabin, a wooden cabin, for 3 nights. The first night they went to sleep and there was a woodpecker who kept banging on the roof of the cabin and they couldn't fall asleep. They went crazy. The second night, again, this woodpecker came back to visit. This time it was raining. And again, the noise of the rain and the noise of this woodpecker drove them crazy. But the husband, and I forget his name, gosh, will come back to me. But the husband stayed calm. And when this happened the third night, he continued to stay calm. Soon after, he said to himself, wow, such an experience we had in our honeymoon. I got to write something about it. And he wrote Woody Woodpecker. He was inspired to write the story. Why? Because of this terrible honeymoon that he had. Now, why am I telling you the story? Because here's a man who exercised the power of positive thinking. Said to himself, yes, I could see my honeymoon as the worst experience I've had in life. I could further, at some I'm sure people would do, I could further maybe see this honeymoon as a sign maybe that I shouldn't be married with this woman. Maybe it's God telling me, oh no, look, I don't want you to get married to her, so I'm going to ruin your honeymoon. But no, the guy knew what Judaism teaches about positive thinking. And he said to himself, I'm going to look at it positively. And I'm going to write a story about it, a nice, beautiful, humorous story about it. And as we all know, it became one of the most celebrated and best-selling stories. He made a lot of money out of it. Why? Because he thought positively. Now, I'm no doctor, I'm no physician, no scientist, but I'm sure the scientists and doctors among you will tell us right now or later, and you can inquire about this, that today you have research that shows that positive thinking changes the neurons in the mind and changes the whole mindset of a person to the point that it affects a person's health, a person's the outcome of things, and positive results. If again the thinking is positive. I don't know the science behind this, but I can tell you that you can research it, and you'll see that today doctors and scientists are in line with what Judaism has been teaching for thousands of years. I will add what the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rabbi Menachem Mendel III Lubavitcher Rebbe would say. He would say, Tracht gut, wird sein gut in Yiddish, which means think good and it will be good. If we think good, and he went as far as saying, as others did, like Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Lunchitz of Prague of the 15th century, was the chief rabbi of Prague. He went as far as saying that even if there's a bad decree upon a person and we think good, that power of our positive thinking will annul the bad decree. That's how powerful our positive thinking is Kabbalistically. Think good, therefore, and it will be good. That's the power we have in our mind right here. So we do believe in positive thinking. And I think that, yes, it's hard sometimes. God puts all sorts of challenges, including diseases and uncertainties, and especially the COVID-19 in our way. But it shouldn't affect, we still have full control over this. We might not have control over the virus. We might not have control about our future, but we do have control about this mind. what we think right here. I'm reminded, and I'll conclude this answer with this beautiful parable about a smart aleck who heard about the wisest man in the world, and he decided to play a trick on him. And he carried a pigeon, a tiny little pigeon in his hands. Remember that story? And he went to this very wise man and he said to him, tell me, is the pigeon that I have in my hand alive or dead? Now, if the wise man would say alive, then he would crush it right there and there, and he would kill it to prove him wrong. And if he was dead, then he would let it go and let the bird fly off to prove him wrong. The wise man looked at him, looked at his hands, and he said to him, my friend, the answer is in your hands. And I say the same thing. The answer of our positive thinking, of our positive moods, of our positive behaviors, all under our control, completely under our control, are in our minds. And that we have control over. So I know the challenges, but let's think positively. And if you can't, then maybe focus on something positive and it will make you think positive. Focus on a hobby you can develop. Focus on a blessing that you have. Focus on a good deed that you can do. And that will change things inside and make you more positive. All right. Last question for today. So, and then I'm happy to take more questions, but this is a three-part question, I suppose. So, how would the resurrection of the dead fit into this new dimension of the coming of the Mashiach? So we've spoken about the coming of Mashiach and how we believe in the ultimate redemption, and hopefully Mashiach will come soon and announce this new era of peace and of redemption in our world. But we also believe that during this era, there will be the resurrection of the dead. In fact, we pray for it 3 times a day. In the Amidah, there's a whole prayer that says, Mechayeh HaMeitim, right? We sing it. Baruch Atah Mechayeh HaMeitim. I forget the tune, but we even sing it. That speaks of the blessing of the resurrection of the dead, of the prayer of the resurrection of the dead. So the question is, how would the resurrection of the dead fit into this coming of Mashiach? You said we would still have our cell phones and continue our regular lives, but how having our dear ones back is foreseen in this new world? I'll reply to that in a second. And then, where is this amazing interpretation coming from? I would like to study more and learn more about it. I can point you to references. 3, finally, are the scholars connecting our year 5780 and the proximity of the redemption with the end of the 6th millennia and upcoming of the 7th, and a parallel with the concept of Shabbat in the Torah? Absolutely, and I'll relate to what you're saying in case it wasn't understood. So let's first speak about the resurrection of the dead, and then speak about what the scholars are saying about this year. But resurrection of the dead is one of the 13 principles of faith. As you know, Maimonides compiled 13 principles of faith. Now, it was unlike Maimonides, or uncharacteristic of Maimonides in many ways. Why? Because Maimonides, if you learned Maimonides and his writings, you'll see he was a very pragmatic man, very practical, very down to earth. He shot straight. He didn't beat around the bush, so to speak. He was very, very, very practical and pragmatic. But he did compile 13 principles of faith. One of those principles, I believe it's the 13th principle, is I believe with complete faith in the resurrection of the dead. That indeed, when Mashiach will come, the dead will come back to life. Now, when will this happen? Maimonides also speaks about that. There are 2 levels, 2 steps in the Messianic era. Step number 1 is, yes, we'll keep our cell phones throughout the 2 steps and throughout this first step too, etc. The world will be like it is today. Just the consciousness of humankind will change. We'll be in an elevated state of consciousness. We'll be able to see people with a bright light. We'll be able to see ourselves with a bright light, almost again like we feel on Yom Kippur or during the spiritual awakenings of life. During that stage, we want, according to Maimonides at least, and some differ, but we want experience yet the resurrection of the dead. The resurrection of the dead will come during the 2nd stage. How many years after that, the first step, will this happen? Maimonides does not say. Some say 40 years. It depends. I don't know. I don't want to throw numbers. Some say 40 years. But let's say after 40 years, that's when we'll have our loved ones come out of their graves and come back to us. How will they come back in the same state, at the same age? So they will come back in the same age. but healthy. So if they died as hunchbacks, if they died with diseases, they'll be totally healthy. They died with no legs, they have their legs back. They'll be totally healthy. Now, again, this is something that is a matter of faith. You know, faith in Judaism is not naivete. Faith in Judaism is when we've exhausted all intellectual options, and yet we still can't understand something. That's when faith comes into play. So this is now where faith comes into play. Another thing about the resurrection of the dead, quite interestingly, is of course that the evil people won't come back. Adolf Hitler won't be back. And all the evil people that we know won't be back. Only the good people will come back. They will come back from their graves. Now you might think, 1 second, what's with the world being overpopulated? We have all these dead people from all generations coming back, and then will there be room? First, as I'm sure you realize, I realized this. I've had teenagers now in my house, not living with us for a few years, and all of a sudden they back, and wow, I have room in my house. I didn't think I had. So you'll also come to that realization when your loved ones come back. Oh, you have room in your house. You didn't even realize. That's number one. But number two, it's a simple calculation. All the evil people won't be living here. So the terrorists, the Hezbollah terrorists and Hamas terrorists will be gone. There will be a lot of room that will all of a sudden open up for these dead. And in general, if there's still no room there, well, it's God's world. God will create a solution. He might just have a new continent appear just for the resurrection of the dead. Who knows? But that's regarding the resurrection of the dead. Now, where does it speak about the resurrection of the dead? Maimonides, in his Mishneh Torah, in his very, very last chapter of the Mishneh Torah, in his 14th book, speaks about it. Nachmanides speaks about it in some of his Torah commentaries, particularly in Deuteronomy. The Zohar speaks about it. Where in the Zohar? I believe in Bamidbar, but I don't remember exactly where. But I'm happy to send you some sources. And now, regarding the final question here about the end of the 6 millennia. So as you all know, the Hebrew year is not 2020. It's funny because, it's year 2020, and it's the year where we have the least 2020 vision. All this uncertainty is causing such fog. But in the Hebrew calendar, it's the year 5780. The Talmud states that history is divided into 3 parts. First 2,000 years were 2,000 years where God had to introduce himself. 2,000 years of monotheism, of Abraham introducing God to the whole world. The next 2,000 years are 2,000 years of Torah, where now the world has to be educated. And Torah came and serves as a GPS for life, for everyone's life, not just Jews, but also non-Jews. And then the last 2,000 years, as the Talmud states, are years of the coming of Mashiach, Yemot HaMashiach, of the days of Mashiach. Now, therefore, we are based on this and based on other rabbinic sources, we believe that Mashiach has to come after those 6,000 years. Those 6,000 years now, with those 3 themes, will have then completed the nature of the world, the natural order of the world, so to speak. And after 6,000 years, the world will have been refined completely, and Mashiach then will have come, because the world will have been ready, will be prepared through those 3 stages for the coming of Mashiach. The question is, now that we're in the year 5780, so are we nearing this end where Mashiach is about to be announced? Or do we have to wait another 220 years? So no, we don't have to wait 220 years. In fact, many leaders, holy leaders of our generations, from the Lubavitch Rebbe to the Baba Sali, to you name whoever you think might be a great rabbi, a holy man in our generation, I will tell you that they all said that the Mashiach is already here. He's by our door. The door is already open. All he's waiting for is for us to welcome him in. To say, hey, come in. We saw you by the door is already open. Let's pull him in. And using this analogy, if those 6,000 years can be compared to the 6 days of the week, as they very often are, and Shabbat being the 7th day, being the 7th, the next stage of the year of the world, being that holy dimension. So the analogy also was used by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I know that very well. I heard him say that we are now just before Shabbat. We've passed midday of Friday already. We are just before Shabbat. Mashiach is coming imminently. So no doubt, you're right. Scholars are connecting our year with the proximity of the redemption with the end of the 6th millennia and the era of Mashiach. So according to all signs, Mashiach is coming anytime. In fact, I will say this also, there are many signs. I don't know, there's so many things, so many directions, but I don't know if you know, if you heard, it was in the news, but one of the walls of the west, one of the stones of the Western Wall fell not long ago. So that comes to fulfill yet another prophecy, that before Mashiach will come, a wall of the temple, a stone from the wall of the temple will fall. You may have seen that this past Tisha B'Av, foxes were found in the temple. That was also in the news. That's to fulfill yet another prophecy, that foxes will be seen before Mashiach comes, coming from the temple. So you have all sorts of signs that we all see. And of course, you have the great saints of our day that are saying that Mashiach is coming imminently. The world is ready. The Mashiach is ready. All that is needed is for human beings now to be ready. We have to start thinking in Mashiach terms, shifting our consciousness, seeing the light in everything, the opportunity in every challenge, the goodness in every bad thing and in every bad person. And if we can shift that consciousness, we'll be right there. Then Mashiach will come and then redeem us all.